Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty and everlasting God, who presides over all things in heaven and earth, come and preside over these deliberations so that those that make the decisions may be guided by your wisdom.
Good evening. This is the December 3rd, 2020 work session for City Council. We are not accepting calls at this particular time. We do accept calls when we go into the regular session of council, which will immediately follow the work session. Mr. Ryan, anything for us this evening?
Nothing on council's agenda, so we'll go right in with the mayor for his agenda items.
Okay, all right. And if I may make one announcement, Mayor, before we do get started, if you are going to be calling on any of your staff, I'd ask that they come to the podium and speak rather than from the back of the room. I know it's sometimes people listening are unable to hear unless we're standing right in front of the, as you are. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Just working.
Okay. Hopefully that's not going to happen, Bill. I don't anticipate calling anybody. We don't really have any presentation. We have three short things here that we'll go over. First of all, it's authorizing proper city officials to open a new checking account, PNC Bank, for the administration of all health department grants. This is going to help Brett Kittrick with controlling 90% of our health department is paid for through grants. So this will be able to be specialized for that purpose. It's going to be much easier for bookkeeping, auditing purpose, and other things. Secondly, authorizing proper city officials to take any and all necessary actions related to the sale of 219, 223 East Northampton Street to Lizette Navarro or her designee for the purchase price of $3,500. This is a couple that lives in Hazleton right now, and they want to start relocating their business to Wilkes-Barre. It's going to be a business on the first floor, and then the second floor will be an apartment. So it's going to be a property that they're investing in, and that's the lot that was empty. It's not the one that we tore down the triple block this year. It was the one that was torn down years ago, I guess because there was a fire there. So this is that lot. The other lot, we're working with city attorney Tim Henry to secure the title and the deed for the other lot that we tore down. Okay. And then thirdly, authorizing issuance of a tax and revenue anticipation note series for 2021, principal amount of $3 million to the lowest responsible bidder. This is a normal, customary yearly practice that we do, and what it does is it allows us to have money at the beginning of the year to pay bills until the taxes start coming in. This has been going on well before I was even on council, so it's not something new. So there are the three things, and just one more thing I wanted to add. 2 weeks ago, when we had the council meeting, myself and Mr. McCormick and Mr. Frady left. I understand that there was some criticism of that, and people didn't like that. Our business was done. You had voted on the things I came before you for, and the rest of that council meeting was actually council's business, you dealing with your businesses and your constituents. I felt our business was done, and I don't think that in any way I shirked my duties by leaving at that time. My duty is to be here to present what my business is, wait for the vote. After that, basically it's the council's meeting. So if anyone took offense to that on council or in the public, sorry about that, but my feeling is I'm here. I come to every meeting, even if it's a different meeting, a work session and a regular session, I'm here. And I'll continue to be here. But by no way after I leave here should I be criticized when I don't believe I did anything that was incorrect. And Mr. Barrett, I'll leave it up to you. You're the council chair. If you feel differently, let me know. Okay?
Totally understand, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, one thing, please. The East Northampton Street sale price, was that the appraised price?
Yes, it is.
So John Anstead appraised that at?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We always Mike, just an FYI for you, we sell them at the appraised price,
Right.
and it's not a big lot. It's a
Yeah, I've
small
seen it.
lot. It's been vacant for a long time, and this is going to be a new business, which is going to create revenue, get it back on the tax rolls. So it's a win-win for the city and for Ms. Navarro, because when I met with she and her husband, they expressed a willingness to start investing in the city of Wilkes-Barre.
Good,
And which is nice to see people from other areas wanting to come back in.
great.
Okay?
Thanks, Mayor.
Any other questions?
Just a comment on the sale of the lot on East Northampton Street. This is in my district and I am supportive of it. It's, this lot every year, it's very unkept, and I think it would be better to be in the hands of private citizens. That way, the city doesn't have the responsibility of
Sure.
cutting the grass there, because every year it's just a
Get it on
mess.
the tax
So,
rolls.
yeah, so I think it's a good sale. Thank you.
And one other thing, once we secure the deed to the other lot, Mr. Henry's working on, that'll be up for sale too. And we've actually had some interest in that lot, but I can't entertain any bids because we don't own it yet. So once that happens, I feel that's going to be quickly sold also.
I haven't looked lately, but I would imagine that most of our property that is for sale is on the website.
Yes.
It is pretty
And
much
what we're
up to-
doing is, we've met with several people. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We've met with several people that have expressed interest in things like the old silk mill that we tore down in Mr. Belusco's district. A few people. We've met with people from outside the area, different entrepreneurs from New Jersey and other areas. And matter of fact, I have ongoing meetings with them into next week. And these are people that are interested in some of the vacant properties that we have. Once again, in Mr. Belusco's area, Cary Avenue, possibility Morgan B. Williams. So we've been trying to market these so that people will invest in the city, bring jobs here, put buildings on these properties. So with all the other things that we're dealing with, we're actively trying to get people to come to the city. And we've been successful with different people coming in saying, yeah, I want to be part of Wilkes-Barre. So I'm hoping that as we get into next year, it's going to help us to also generate some funds, help build up the OCD funding and then whatever's left over, hopefully general fund budget. I don't know that yet, but we're in the works is what I'm trying to say with several of our properties.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Barrett, I do want to say something. In all due respect, Mayor, I do believe it was disrespectful to leave the council without hearing us give our presentations, which happens, but also even more disrespectful to the public who calls in and has questions that you may be able to answer. With all due respect, sir.
Okay, anything else on the agenda items? No? Mr. Belusco, anything for us this evening?
Sorry, George.
Nothing today, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Marconi?
I do. There are a few issues that I reported to Mr. Fratty and also Charlie up in my district, and they were taken care of. I do want to thank both of them for that. And Mr. Mayor, Johnson Street looks like it was done paved today, and got some positive comments from residents, and it's looking really good. I just want to thank you for that as well. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. McBride?
A couple of things. A few weeks ago, there was a water main break on South Grant Street, and the water company still hasn't done anything to repair the road. I know that it takes a while for them to do that, but it's in pretty bad condition. So if we could somehow encourage them maybe to do that a little bit faster, that would be helpful. And that's on South Grant Street.
Do you know what utility it was?
Water,
Water?
yeah. And then the street sweeper, the city street sweeper went up East Northampton Street today. And I appreciate that the street sweeper is out and about, but if we could just notify the areas that the street sweeper is going to be going through, I think that would be helpful. Only because all the cars were still parked on the road. And so it really didn't do too much there. So if we could just make that a practice, I would appreciate that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes, I definitely want to thank the mayor for the COVID policies that here at City Hall, and I heard you on the radio as well. I think that is appropriate that we take this very seriously and abide by all these new policies. I also want to report that I just got a message from Jeanette Wasinski. This is the woman we visited at 280 Brown Street when you were doing the tours with us. And this is the third time she has contacted me saying that nothing has been done with her neighbor on Brown Street. I'll get you the addresses, Charlie, and broken windows over on Andover Street and cars that are parked on Gilligan Street. So I'll get you the more information. She just left me a message now knowing that I was going to come here. So I'll forward it to you in an email tomorrow. Nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And it was a good day in South Wilkes-Barre, Mayor. Solomon Creek, Mr. Belisco, and everyone else that was there that had, all of us that had a part in it. It looks like it turned out very well. Nice to see that problem right there has been rectified, and congratulations to everybody that had a role in it. And that's all that I have. Nothing else from council. We'll take a short break for a minute.
This is from council by unanimous consent. Can the three resolutions be combined into a consent agenda? Again, if there are no objections from council.
No objections?
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, then it will be combined into one agenda and one item, one agenda item and one vote.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds good. Okay, please rise to the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty and everlasting God, who presides over all things in heaven and earth, come and preside over these deliberations so that those that make the decisions may be guided by your wisdom.
Okay, Mr. Ryan.
Roll call. Mr. Belisco.
Here.
Mr. Marconi.
Here.
Mrs. McBride.
Present.
Mr. Brooks.
Here.
And Mr. Barrett.
Here.
Also in attendance tonight is Mayor George C. Brown, Administrator Charles McCormick, City Attorney Tim Henry, IT Director Frank Hirschberger, Assistant City Clerk Catherine Payne, and Administrative Assistant Lisa Sanfilippo. First, we have pending legislation, and council will now take comments on agenda items from the public by phone. The phone line is now open. 5 minutes, please. Agenda items only. Please call if you have an agenda item you wish to discuss before council and the mayor.
Bob Kalabowski. I'm now living in a van down by the river. And am I allowed to talk about the council benefits and stuff right now?
No.
Okay, I'll have to call back then. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ryan, I believe we have one letter. Well, that did it. Always works.
Please state your name and where you're calling from.
John Rushton, East End Section of Wilkes-Barre.
Go ahead, John.
I was just wondering, two things. One, I have a question for the mayor. When is tax free going to be paid?
John, if I can stop you, we're talking about agenda items right now. You're gonna have to call back after we have the voting session.
And another thing, I just want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thanks, John.
Okay, Jim.
Okay, the one,
Please state your name and where you're calling from.
Yes, Jason Carr, Sailorsburg, Pennsylvania. Regarding the $3 million tax anticipation note, has City Council or the mayor discussed possibly taking out a $5 million tax anticipation note, taking into consideration the $3 million that previously has been established that the city needs, as well as the $2 million shortfall? In the anticipation that the federal government, which is now working possibly together to come to an agreement where $168 billion will be given to the municipalities and cities throughout the country, is that an option rather than raising taxes on the city? Has that been discussed at all? Thank you so much.
That's an interesting, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that's an interesting point, and there was that legislation. Remember, Beth, you showed me some legislation about,
Yes.
We got confused about LSTs, but there was something in there about TANs and the ability to use it to cover expenses, and the payback program was later. Have you read that legislation at all, Charlie?
In the past, but there's a limitation by statute. We
Ms.
can't
McCormick, if I can ask you to come up here, please.
There's a limitation by statute that's determined by the, if I recall correctly, the 3 highest months of deficit. So it's tied to the budget. It's not tied to just discretionary issues that council or the mayor can pick. It's a statutory requirement. So that's all we're able to do under the statute that allows TAN borrowing.
Okay.
It's not general borrowing for general borrowing purposes. That's not what it's for.
So it's just TAN borrowing for
Yeah, it's-
COVID related?
Correct.
Oh,
No.
No?
It's TAN. It's if I recall correctly, it's a calculation made on the basis of the 3 highest deficit months based on the returns of revenue and expenses that your budget shows, so that you can't borrow any more than those 3 composite months show as a deficit, as an ongoing deficit. So that's already been determined by the financial officer and
Okay.
PFM.
Yeah, it's actually a loan tax anticipation note for that purpose. It allows us to support the city functions while we're anticipating tax payments coming in.
Correct.
That's the only purpose, and it is limited dollar-wise, as Attorney McCormick said.
Wait, so I'm confused. I understand that, TAN, I mean, this is a traditional thing we always do, but there was legislation that, from my understanding, has expanded the definition of how we can use it related to COVID and covering our expenses, because we will have a deficit from our tax revenues. You know what, I may suggest that we table this until our next meeting to really expand that. I mean, I know we can certainly vote on TAN on December 17th, to really fully understand this a little bit more, and maybe that is something that we could use to our advantage to offset the loss of revenues that the mayor's budget is projecting. Is that something anyone else would consider?
I agree. Also because I know in the legislation, it's House Bill 2536.
Right, that's the House bill, right.
In the legislation, they also enable municipalities to push back the maturity date of the TAN.
That's what I read too.
So
right.
I think that's something that it might benefit us to look into just in case. It can't hurt. So I agree with tabling it
Would you agree,
until the
Charlie,
next
to
meeting.
explore that more for us on our behalf?
Sure, if it's legislation, it's not the law.
No,
It's passed.
this passed, this is a, yeah.
We'll look at it,
Okay.
look at every suggestion.
Okay, yeah, if anyone else agrees with me, could we table that and explore this a little bit more of a way to benefit the city and helping out the mayor's budget for next year?
I agree too, absolutely.
Mike, at all?
Okay.
I have-
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, as always, rather than table it, which means that it's hanging out there, the best thing to do is just to remove it from the
Okay.
agenda.
Then I move to remove it for the agenda for consideration at our next council meeting.
Yeah, no motion, just
Right.
unanimous.
And this has nothing to do with, I completely agree with TANs. I completely agree with the $3 million, but that maybe this is something that we can explore that can help your budget for next year. And this is just off the top of my head of what I've been reading, so, thank you.
You had mentioned that there may be a cap as to how much we can actually borrow in a tax anticipation note.
Now, there may be special legislation on that to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen it.
Right, because, right, this is just a resolution, so we can do it on December 17th, right?
My concerns have to do with time. I know it's a resolution that only requires one reading, but
No, but there may be, Tim, do we have advertising requirements in that?
I'll have to check with Brett because I'm not really involved with the TANF program market. I mean, one option you might consider is passing tonight's resolution, and if we find out we can do more, we could just do an amended resolution on the 17th. That way, if we can't do more, it's already done.
Okay, I mean,
I'm leaning, personally, that's the direction I'm leaning in.
Right, I mean,
I don't want to take a chance. This is something we do have to pay back.
and
It's something that if we don't get through, or we get bogged down
Yeah.
in it prior to January, we're going to have an issue.
with Attorney Tim Henry just said, I agree with that too. I mean, that's fine. I don't want to jeopardize at all that $3 million TAN. I just want to make sure that we explored every opportunity, and if I will heed to your suggestion that we then could come back on December 17th, and if it behooves us to expand that related to this legislation from Harrisburg that passed, we can do that. So I'm fine with that. Is that okay?
Let's move forward with that.
Yeah, okay. All right, so, all right, Mr. Ryan, then keep it on the agenda.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
very fluid.
Let me just explain something else. Mr. Troy also sent in a letter asking about the TAN, and in response to that, I'll give you a little more information. It was
I'm trying to be
put,
difficult, Charles. Just trying to
We're
think
actually going to
things
read his letter into it. We'll go through the whole
Okay.
letter.
Mhm.
do you want me to respond now?
Why don't we read the letter, and if you want to respond to his specific questions, we can do it at that time, when we get to that particular point, which I think we're just about there anyway. Let's hear the letter first, and then you can answer the concerns.
Okay, this letter, as Chairman mentioned, this email is from Sam Troy, received today, concerning the TAN. By the way, the formal name is not TAN, it's TRAN. That's for Tax and Revenue Anticipation Note. I think people call it TAN just to shorten it, but technically it's a TRAN. Was a request for proposal issued to see what bank might offer better terms or a better interest rate for the note? Has the city shopped around to see if a different bank could offer those better terms? Or is this city locked into getting the TAN from the same bank every year? What interest rate is the city going to be paying for this particular TAN? Is it possible that the city could be granted a longer term to repay the note because of the pandemic? These are serious questions that should be addressed by council now and explained to the public now, since the city is in the midst of its worst financial crisis ever. Question for Mr. Henry: does the city's charter obligate it to issue an RFP for this TAN every year? Sam
All right.
Troy. Sam Troy.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Okay, in anticipation of answering that, I reached out to Mr. Kittredge to get the way that this is done on the basis. Yes, it was put in both newspapers, and also emailed the RFP directly to about six or seven different banks. So it was put in both papers, and the RFP was emailed to 6 or 7 different banks. The RFP was also posted on the city's website. Interest rate is 0.825%. the PNC ended up having the lowest overall cost to the city. You don't have to get into, let me see what else I have. Okay, here's another answer to what you were saying. We can't have longer to pay it back because of the pandemic. It has to be repaid in the same year it's issued. The deadline to repay is December 31st. And then also, we're not obligated by the charter to issue an RFP, but we still do it anyway. So if you have any, I'll help out with your questions.
Okay, thank you. Any calls, Kathy? Hey, Mr. Ryan, you want to proceed with the vote, please?
Okay. This will be for the combined resolutions into a single agenda item. Motion, second, and vote.
A motion?
Second.
Motion was from Mike. Is that from Mike?
Yes, I motion.
Okay, and
Second.
Bill, Tony?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Beluska?
Yes.
Mr. Marconi?
Yes.
Mrs. McBride?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
And Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Motion passes. And the next item is the adoption of the minutes. Motion, second, and vote.
Motion.
That was Mr. Marconi
Second.
and Beth. Mr. Beluska?
Yes.
Mr. Marconi?
Yes.
Mrs. McBride?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
And Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Motion passes. Motion passes also. That's it for the agenda items. Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll go back into council presentations once more. Mr. Belisco, anything additional?
Nothing. Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Marconi?
Yes, I do. I just want to speak with the mayor and Charlie, the administration. I just want to let you know that we're still willing to work with you on the budget. Certainly willing to meet you halfway. I was surprised that I didn't see the budget here on the agenda, but I just want to put it out there that we certainly are still open to some compromise. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mrs. McBride?
I would like to address the budget negotiations that have been ongoing between the administration and council's leadership. In particular, I do want to thank Vice Chairman Brooks for his efforts in conveying our requests and ensuring that each of our voices were heard during these negotiations. And although myself and my other colleagues were not present at these meetings, we felt included, so thank you for that. I'm making this statement because we owe it to the public to explain why the budget isn't on the agenda tonight. I am disappointed that there hasn't been a compromise for the sake of the residents of Wilkes-Barre. Time and time again, both in front of the public and in private, my colleagues and I have stressed the importance of compromise and how willing we are to make this budget work for all of the people of Wilkes-Barre. Suggestions we made to approach the unions and work with them were shot down. We couldn't even get the heads of our unions to attend or call into our council meetings to address our concerns. Pay freezes for 1 year were shot down. Modest increases in the rental inspection fees were shot down. Cuts in overtime were shot down. Most importantly, and I want the public to really think about what this means, the plea to meet us halfway so that the administration only has to come up with a $1.2 million gap rather than a $2.4 million gap in the budget was shot down. We are willing to meet halfway if the city made other serious cuts. We're not being unreasonable by asking for a compromise. My colleagues and I have done our part. We are pleading with the administration to work with us, not against us. The infighting and the blame game needs to stop here. The need for change within our city budget needs to become a reality sooner rather than later, before the city does end up with the state coming in and being under Act 47. I've been on council for 5 years now. And although that is a relatively short time, it's long enough to be able to see certain patterns in our local government. During the time that I've been on council, as well as prior to that, we have heard conversations about the city's financial status and distress. As recently as 2018, we have had discussions on the state level regarding our financial status. When we were denied Act 47 status in 2018, we only met 2 of the 11 criteria to qualify for distress status: recurring deficits and expenses exceeding revenues for 3 years or more. I bring this up because I want to point out that our city's financial issues will not be solved through consistent fee increases or tax increases. Our financial issues are deeper than the COVID-19 crisis or the increase in the cost of recycling. Our problems are structural, and if we don't take them seriously now, then I'm afraid that we will never will. Changes in the structure of our government through compromise is the only way that things will change this year. I implore the administration to strongly consider our requests for the residents of our city. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes, I will not read my speech that I gave at the last minute meeting. I'm hopeful that the mayor saw it posted on Facebook and read it there, so I certainly don't want to rehash that. I want to also stress again that council has again frozen its wages. We are not taking the 3% increase, and we have done this now for 21 consecutive years since 1999. This is the time that we need to come together and not grow apart. Council is willing to work with the mayor, continue to work with the mayor, and we still have our offers that are on the table, and I'm still willing to compromise. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And I just would like to thank the mayor, Charlie, and your administration for sitting with us as much as you have been.
Yes.
We've been seeing a lot of each other. The ideas that Mrs. McBride had brought up were, I believe, all discussed at some point in those meetings. There were, when you talk about wage freezes, it sounds relatively easy to somebody, but when you're dealing with all these collective bargaining agreements, I think we all learned a little bit more about those agreements and how they are pretty much etched in stone. We do appreciate all that you've done, the information that you've brought to us, and I was hopeful that we were able to get this budget in its current or reasonably close to its current form passed. The alternatives, I'm very apprehensive about. I know that Mrs. McBride just mentioned Act 47 and the qualifications, but you know, we've been so close in the past, and way too close. We were right on that edge of that cliff. I feel like we're heading right back there again, through no fault of anybody in this room. It's been a very difficult year. I don't anticipate it getting much easier anytime in the immediate future. You know, we had talked about fees and increases, and I have been here longer than anyone else here. And I don't like fee increases, I don't like tax increases. I think that what this budget that has been proposed to us has been a very workable template for us. It was reasonable, it was equitable. I've been hearing from different people that share the same concerns I do about staffing and about services. And I know that we cannot go very far into 2021 without a realistic budget in place with the real numbers in place, or we're going to find ourselves in a very serious position in the not too distant future. I know that we have talked quite a bit. We have talked here, and sure, we can continue to talk, but I do know that we need realistic numbers. We need a fiscally responsible budget. I think that we talk about compromise, we talk about numbers. Well, compromise is probably the wrong word. I don't like that word compromise when we're talking about trying to work together to come up with a budget. I like solutions, and I know a lot of possible solutions are brought up, and there are a lot of great ideas that were brought up. But I don't know if it's going to be enough to close that $2 million gap I'm not crazy about borrowing another, because that's basically what you're doing with the TAN, is you're borrowing against yourself. We haven't seen the federal government be quite candidly very forthcoming with relief for municipalities, let alone states. And they talk about it, but I'll believe it when I see it. Hopefully I will see it. But I'm very concerned about where we're going to be if we go into January without a budget in place. And it's not easy to make up $2 million without increasing something somewhere. There have been changes, there have been concessions, positions not being filled, hiring freezes. Yeah, those are all things that are within our power. To go back and do wage freezes when there are collective bargaining agreements in place is only going to result in unfair labor practices and arbitrations and other issues that aren't going to solve anything. So I'm just hopeful that we can come to some sort of an agreement and a solution to all of this before we go into next year. So Mr. Brooks and I am sure are more than willing to continue discussions. Sure, by all means, please.
First of all, yeah, I am thankful that you came together, Mr. Marconi, Mrs. McBride, Mr. Brooks, and with one voice at that meeting. Be honest with you, we looked at every suggestion you had. And if I can, let me just review a couple of them. I don't have the power to create wage freezes. That's something that has to be done with the unions. I can't mandate a wage freeze. I'll have an unfair labor practice charge. I can't do that. I've met with the leadership of all 4 unions in my office. I've asked if there were considerations that could be made. I've done that. Pilot programs that you've suggested, we've said this several times, and several of you have been on council for several years. I can't mandate any pilots. They're voluntary. Until the state legislature changes the program, I can't do anything other than sit in someone's office and ask them for money. We actually did that right after the pandemic started. Mr. McCormick and I sat in the offices of Wilkes and Kings, and we said, we need the money now. Wilkes did give us $100,000. Kings gave us $125,000. But we went in there and asked them. I can't demand that they give us more than that. Highmark was very generous with us. But please understand, some of the suggestions that you made, one was the LST. That's not something we can do unless we're an Act 47 city, and we're not. So some of the suggestions that we looked at, we just don't have an opportunity to change. As the mayor, I don't have that authority, and you don't have the authority as city council. I wish we were getting more in pilots. We're getting as much as I can get people to give us. I can't freeze wages. I can't make people give up their raises. That's something I don't have the ability to do. We're looking at cutting overtime. We have 2 positions, recent voluntary people that left. My plan is not to fill them. We're looking at positions that we're not going to fill. We're doing that. We're looking at other areas. We're very, very restrictive as far as the overtime now. And we've been doing that for several months. Mr. McCormick approves all the overtime. So we've done some initiatives. As you know, with your help, we rewrote $22 million in bonds. It saved us $816,000. Folks, what I'm trying to tell you is every avenue that we can do to save money, we've tried to do. The bond for the retirement plan that we rewrote. You're allowing us to save $1.3 million in next year's MMO. These are things that we're doing, and we're doing it because it's good financial practice. No matter what someone may call in and say otherwise, it's good financial practice. But the things that you're asking me to do, I don't have the power to do. Okay? We have a pandemic going on. We're inspecting as many properties as we can with respect to the pandemic. We are looking at other jobs that we're trying to reconstruct. Everything that we can do, we're doing. Now, as far as working with you, yes, I stood here 2 weeks ago and asked you for $1 a week. Since then, I've made 2 other offers. One was 90 cents a week, and the most recent was 85 cents a week. I've asked you for 85 cents more a week for sewage and recycling, and I have not gotten approval for that. 85 cents a week. So I have tried to work with you. I cannot run this city on 50 cents a week. I understand you're willing to meet me halfway. Financially, I can't pay the bills. I can't make payroll, I can't make health care coverage, and I can't pay the bills on that 50 cents a week. Even at 85 cents a week, I'm going to have to make some other decisions how to save that money that I have to make up. So I appreciate the fact that in your mind, you're changing it to where at least you're willing to make a change and, you know, in the revenues that will be created through these fee increases. But folks, it's not enough. It's just not enough. The barest I can go is 85 cents a week. And I hate to have this budget not passed and have to do the other things that I've mentioned to you that I have to do as mayor because I don't have the money to run the city. That's the fact. I have tried to work with you, cutting 15 cents a week out from that dollar. I can't go any deeper. I just can't do that. And Mr. Marconi, that's the reason why this budget's not on today's agenda, because I can't physically run this city that way. I love this city. You folks love this city. I want the city to grow. You want it to grow. I'm meeting with outside investors. I can't run this city on just 50 cents. So for an extra 35 cents a week, we don't have a budget. But that 35 cents a week means a lot to the city. So I feel we have tried to work with you. I mean, we've had an open mind, and we have made reductions. But folks, I'm limited what I can do, where I could pull this money from. I appreciate your suggestions, and we've listened to every one. And Tony will tell you that as your representative. We've gone through every single one that you've asked us to look at. So I feel bad too. I would love to be before you saying, here's my budget, and you say, yeah, Mayor, it's a budget we can work with. We're not there, and we're not going to be there, folks. I can't run the city on 50 cents a week. I'm sorry about that, and there's nothing that any of us did. It's this pandemic. We didn't create this. You guys didn't create this, and I didn't create this. Nobody did. It's the pandemic. And I was on you guys know that I created a mayor's committee. It's Mayor Cognetti, it's Mayor Lombardo, it's Mayor Coughlin, and it's Mayor Crusat. Today we had a meeting and we're all in the same situation. Now, the difference is some of those cities are Act 47. Scranton's Act 47, Hazleton. They're different, okay? But we all have still the same shortfall money-wise, revenue-wise. And we're all in the same situation. And one of the messages that we did in our press conference today was asking the federal government for help. We're getting nothing. We're getting money for PPE, and that's it. Nothing to replace the revenue. So the problem's not leadership. The problem's not council. The problem's not anything but the pandemic and the results of that, and also the fact that the federal government's giving us nothing to help replace the revenue shortage. Trying to be very open with you, but folks, honestly, the best I can do is 85 cents a week. I can't do any better than that. We're creating this committee, and I was mentioning to Mr. Brooks that we've had several good candidates apply for this relief committee that we want to do with senior citizens and other people that have been hit hard by it, and we're going to do that. And we're going to offer relief to people. We'll be offering help with utility payments, helping them pay their utility bills. And we have good people that want to be on this. That'll be a help. But we are limited as far as resources. So I just felt I had to stand up here, and I respect everybody. All due respect to you. I'm sorry, but I can't present a budget to you if I don't have the money in that budget to run the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
One more thing. believe me, I don't want to be adversarial with you either. That's not the way I want to be, and I think that we can work together, okay?
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, I think now is a good time to mention the particulars as far as adopting a budget. Since we're now into the month of December, I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but for the sake of what it's worth, I'd like to point out that council must pass a balanced, fully funded budget by 12/31/1920. It requires 2 readings with 7 days between the first and second reading, and normally becomes effective 10 days later. Just for whatever it's worth.
So, Mr. Ryan, so you're saying we would have to, if we were to enter into an agreement now, say in our next meeting, we would have to have an emergency meeting for one of the second,
Sure.
put it to a second vote, we would have to have an emergency meeting.
Special meeting, yeah.
Not,
Okay.
not necessarily an emergency, but an additional meeting.
Okay, all right,
If you
addition.
do that, you might have to have a first reading before the next meeting. Yeah.
Right.
I think if you
Right.
wait for the next meeting to do a first reading, that would be too late.
We have to have something before the second.
Right, like next week.
Okay, that concludes presentations by council members, unless there's something else that we missed from. Okay, all right. Public discussion. Now is the time, if somebody wishes to call in and speak about any item, any council-related item, you can do so now.
Bob Kalaboski, and I'm calling from outside. I'd just like to say that I'm sort of appalled at this council because I just don't understand. We want the unions to give up, and the unions are willing to give up. But yet I don't see any council people giving up anything other than Mr. Marconi. Now, my proposal is, and I've been asking this, I want a 50% cut in your salaries. I want you people to immediately, no more buybacks for your health insurance. I want Beth, and it's nothing against you personally, Beth, or Mike, I want both yous off that health care, as I pointed out to you. Look at how much money we're spending on the council people that use full-time or part-time service towards a full-time pension, and we're stuck paying these people some type of health benefits for the rest of their lives. We can't continue to do this stuff. We can't. And what's even more appalling, that I talked to some people from Public Works, is we have part-time people down there working in all these adverse conditions, especially with COVID, and they have no health care, and they're part-time. Just like the Wilkes-Barre City Council is part-time, these people have no health care benefits. And if you're not going to give up, Beth, and if Mike's not going to give up, and Tony's not going to give up his buyout, I want you people to immediately put those people on full-time health care. They're in a dangerous job, could be injured at any time, they could get sick at any time, and I want them to get the same health care that you're getting. And people are appalled when they see Councilman Belushko with the money he's getting for his health care, and in the deep baritone voice, not going to give it up. It's a slap in the face to the people who are suffering. And you, Beth, with $41,166 or whatever it is a year between your salary and benefits, it's outrageous. And your proposal to stop that health care in the next council term is a sham. Just what you, Tony, Mike are going to get, it's going to cost us how many hundreds of thousands of dollars the next 36 months. You have to give it up. You need to take a 50% pay cut. You need to get rid of all this health care stuff. It's outrageous. Nobody could work part-time and get that type of health care coverage. I don't have it. Luckily, I'm going to be able to get it through the government shortly. You people are, it's almost hysterical. I'd bust out laughing if it wasn't so serious, that you're talking about compromising, and that you people are doing nothing at all And when you say freezing the salaries, I told you it's costing us $180,000 a year for these other retired clowns that were council people, went on to higher offices and stuff. And look at the money, that's $180,000 a year for these people retired. It's outrageous. And I want to tell you people, the taxpayers are sick of it all. And where we're going to end up is in Act 47. I talked to an attorney who, a prominent businessman, is going to put the money up to begin exploring to force us into Act 47, and then they'll maybe be able to take all this healthcare stuff off you. And I also talked to a very reliable source. You people could remove yourselves from the pension. You should not be able to put that money in that pension fund, because one of you are going to end up running for mayor someday and do exactly what these last bunch of clowns did and use that part-time service towards a full-time pension. So once again, please give it all up. I want everything given up. I want a 50% pay cut in your salaries. And more importantly, to repeat it, so all those poor people that are down there, the poor guys that are down there working at Public Works that are getting no health care, if you people don't give it up, I immediately want them put on health care. Because if they're out there working in those dangerous conditions, they should have the health care. And I mean, Beth, I feel sorry for you that you have a family, but I also feel sorry for the taxpayers that are going to get cut or that have to pay more money in fees and stuff. And all this comes down to is greed by the past administrations for the last 30 years, padding all their pensions money they get, all their part-time service, all these people padding their pensions with overtime. And what Beth said, if these people at Public Works are doing things to double up on their salaries or their overtime, that has to be stopped. So don't think I'm not playing just one side. If they're doing something wrong, it has to be stopped. But the bottom line is they don't want to give nothing up, because all you people doing is you're sticking money in your own pockets. So once again, I'm going to hang up, and I'd like an answer. What are you going to give up? So I guess that's all I got to say, unless somebody wants to say something to me.
Okay, thank you. Comments? Okay.
Please state your name and where you're calling from.
Hello?
Please state your name and where you're calling from.
Sam Troy, Wilkes-Barre.
Go ahead, Mr. Troy.
Yes, I had some difficulty with my phone in the agenda part of the meeting, and I was just wondering, I know my email was read, if somebody, I appreciate it if somebody would just respond to that. I think that's a critical point about the TAN. Whether there's anything in the, if Mr. Henry or somebody commented on whether there's anything written in the charter that there has to be an RFP issued to get the best deal on the TAN. Is the same kind of deal every year that the city is locked into. I don't know if that question was answered, but the mayor keeps talking about how he's figuratively between a rock and a hard place in this budget, and little things like that maybe are not so little that could mean significantly more revenue for the city or more ability to pay its bills. A better deal on the TAN. In comment, just a couple general comments. One very briefly about the tree situation. As most of you know, it was a horrible deal on last month on South Pennsylvania Ave with this project, the LCTA project down there. I think it was PennDOT who was responsible for cutting down more than 20 beautiful trees that were planted after the flood. I think most of them were oak trees. And I asked Butch Frady, and I asked a couple of members of council, I asked Eddie Pashinsky to please contact PennDOT and see if they could compensate the city in some way, financially, monetarily, to start a fund so that more trees could be put into a fund, so more trees could be planted in the city, so that the Shade Tree Commission's hands would not be tied so much. We would have some funding there. I know there's other ways to seek funding, but I think that would be critical. I think somebody in the city could have had more leverage to stop that carnage, that tree carnage that happened there. I think it's just horrible. But the time being limited, I just wanted to move on to the budget in reaction to some of the mayor's comments. that were made just previous to this public comment session. First of all, I sent an email to the mayor, and I'm not trying to be hostile here either, but I'm concerned as a taxpayer and a citizen who, along with other taxpayers and citizens, carries the burden of bailing the city out time after time when it's in financial difficulties. Look, Mr. Mayor and council people, we, the taxpayers, did not create this financial crisis, this fiscal crisis. There's a lot of factors that contribute to this, I realize. We have too many KOZs in the city. But I think one factor the mayor is overlooking, and I'd like him to respond to this, is the fact that during the late years, there was a lot of free spending. We built an intermodal center. We committed, I don't know how much the city committed to that. We built a large labor and industry building on South Washington Street. We raised a historical structure, the Radnor building. The Cole Street project was another one where the city went into debt. I realize the Cole Street Authority is paying that back, but the city did shell out a lot of money for that. The Johnson Controls Energy project, $5 or $6 million went into that. I don't think the city got its money's worth out of that. If it did, why are we in this fiscal crisis? Why is it so critical? So I think the chickens are coming home to roost. I think the law of karma is being enacted here. What goes around comes around and all that. There was a lot of free spending, and Mayor Brown, I want to point out to you, you were on council for 4 years during the late administration, and you gave the go-ahead for a lot of these projects, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not the intermodal, but certainly Johnson Controls and a couple of other things there that he did. So how do we solve this crisis? In my time remaining, I just want to emphasize, I would like the mayor and council people to come forward. You people tend to be very cynical of public input concerning resolving the fiscal crisis. I have a lot of good suggestions. The mayor claims that he can't use any of these suggestions, and at least the suggestions have been provided by council. But I think if he and some of the council people and the citizens got together and had a brainstorming session, we could probably resolve this crisis to some extent at least. So these fees would not have to go up. In short, as I said, the people of the city, the citizens of the city are fed up with being victimized by fiscal crisis after fiscal crisis and bearing the burden for bailing the city out. Why should we have to constantly do that? I don't think it's fair, Mayor. I don't think it's fair to the council people who voted for that budget. Mr. Barrett, Mr. Velasco, I think you have some explaining to do as to why you would exert this extra burden on the taxpayers. I don't care how many people called in and expressed concern about layoffs. That should not be the choice, as I pointed out before. We should not be in between a rock and a hard place. I will end along those lines, but I would like some response from the mayor. I think some sort of task force or ad hoc committee should be formed with people, citizens, normal, average citizens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Troy. Mr. Troy.
And give our points, a lot of which are valid, that would bail the city out. And how about the possibility of asking some of these KOD property owners to bail us out with some money? They've been getting along without paying taxes for I don't know how many years, right? How about Mr. Joe Amato, who just got a generous LSA grant to improve his theater? Everybody's going to say they're hurting because...
Mr. Troy, thank you. Okay, you brought up a couple of questions about the TRAN as far as the bidding process. Maybe we could just get a clarification on that.
Bill, I think I answered every question.
I think you did also.
We did RFPs.
Okay.
We sent it out to 6 or 7 other banks. I mean, we put it in a paper.
Yep.
I think Mr. Troy did not hear what I was saying.
I don't believe he did either.
But every question that he had on that email he sent in,
right,
I had Brett answer. In response to a lot of the things he talked about, I wasn't even on council at that time. Okay, I wasn't on council with the intermodal. I wasn't on council with the other things he talked about. The one thing I was on council was with the Johnson Controls. And there has been substantial savings in the police department, I believe, and DPW. One of the things that I keep bringing up is that we have some HVAC issues with the unit downstairs. I don't know what that's going to cost. I don't know. It could be something minor. I don't think so. But whatever it costs, yeah, that's part of the Johnson Control thing. But there has been substantial savings in the police department and the DPW building. So that's the one that I was directly involved with, but the other ones, that was way before I was on city council. As far as the trees coming down, I mean, we don't decide. That's not our property. That was county property. It's a county project. Right. Now, One thing we are going to do, and by the way, Mr. Troy called me twice. I called him back 6 times in 1 week. 6 times. And every time I left a message and I said, Sam, this is the 6th time I'm calling you back. I can't call you back anymore. So 6 times in 1 week, folks. I'm just letting you know I don't avoid him, and I did try to reach out to him. But we are going to be planting another tree. I expressed to Sam that he put a tree on the square through the Shade Tree Commission, and it's honoring the healthcare people, you know, the heroes that are working in healthcare. Mr. Brooks, we're putting a second one up in the new park we're building, okay? So up in the Rolling Mill Hill Park. There's going to be another tree up there. I want to put one in each of the 5 districts, and we're going to have a nice plaque on them and designating in honor of healthcare professionals. So eventually you'll have one in each of your districts, just that we're putting a new park up there, and that's the perfect place to put the second one. It's a little bit off of what he's asking me, but I had to answer him anyway, so.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Please state your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, Jason Carr from Sailorsburg, Pennsylvania. Mr. Chairman, I want to apologize at the last meeting. I didn't mean to speak through you. I guess there's a delay, and I was watching the clock on the computer. It's very hard to hear you. I'd never heard you asking me to stop speaking at the last meeting, so I want to apologize. I wasn't doing that to be rude or ignorant. But I just wanted to make a couple points. I guess first of all, there's a structural problem with the deficit in the budget of the city of Wilkes-Barre that needs to be addressed and needs to start being worked on by the mayor and city council. So now's the time to do it. Raising fees is not going to do it. And to open your minds up to another option, why don't you start considering looking at the option of raising taxes on properties instead of fees? It'll be much lower of a burden on the average citizen, the average homeowner in the city of Wilkes-Barre, if you raise property taxes rather than raise those 2 fees. I know that the mayor's cronies and buddies down in Riverside Park and Barney Farms don't want that. Their houses become more worthless than what they already are, but why aren't you exploring that option as well? It'll be much less of a burden on the citizens to make up that $2 million deficit. Which there shouldn't be any tax increase anyway, because the mayor missed the opportunity back in April and May. The mayor created this problem. The mayor created this problem by not taking advantage of the opportunity where the federal government was paying $4,800 a month plus unemployment compensation to anyone that was laid off due to the pandemic. There were many opportunities to do that. To lay off firemen, to lay off policemen, to lay off, the mayor actually even laid off 10 people because there was nowhere to go because of the roof blowing off. So there were opportunities to lay people off, and the mayor could not perform. If we look at bordering cities of the city of Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Hazleton, 40 Fort, Kingston, Hanover Township, Wilkes-Barre Township, Nanticoke and Pittston all have balanced budgets. None of them are looking to raise taxes. Hazleton actually is looking to raise taxes, but that mayor has proposed a spending plan for additional spending. That's why he wants to raise taxes, not because the budget's not balanced. If you look, Beth Gilbert has mentioned several times throughout the last year, from October 2019 until 2 meetings ago, has talked about proposing limiting the benefits that council receives, such as eliminating the buybacks, lowering salaries, eliminating pensions and health care, and even proposing term limits. So I would like, if it's possible, that Ms. Gilbert could propose a date when she will be forwarding that legislation for an up or down vote by council, so she possibly the council can stop having myself and Mr. Kalabowski speak about it, because it is outrageous. You are outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, you are the highest compensated council in the entire state of Pennsylvania, People have to realize that. And so you want to raise taxes on the citizens while you are the highest compensated city council in the entire state of Pennsylvania, outside of outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So obviously something needs to change, and we need a date from Ms. Gilbert about that. As well, I've been listening to the council members, the 3 council members, that the mayor is looking to vote for his budget, which is outrageous. What does compromise actually mean to you? When you talk about compromise, we're going to compromise with the mayor. We know the mayor doesn't have any options. He doesn't have too many ideas around how to fix the situation. We know that. But what does compromise mean to you? Because all 3 of you have said today that you're willing to compromise with the mayor. Are you compromising with the elderly's Social Security checks? Are you compromising with the rents that I'm not receiving because the courts are closed and people aren't paying and I'm not able to evict them? Are you compromising with the restaurants that are currently designated by the governor not to open? Are you compromising with the small business owner who has lost 50% of his revenue this year? So what does compromise mean to you regarding the mayor's budget, and can you explain to the electorate how you're going to compromise with what money? What are you looking to actually do with this compromise?
Mr. Carr, thank you.
Thank you so much, and also I would like to let Mr. Kadlubowski know I'd be willing to donate to that fund to actually take the city into Act 47.
Thank you, sir.
Because that's what actually needs to happen.
Thank you. I don't know how the mayor is responsible for the pandemic. I said, I don't know how you've been accused of being responsible for the pandemic. None of us are. It was mentioned there, you didn't create the pandemic. Don't think that we need to be laying off our workers in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of the worst health crisis in over a century. The last thing we need to do is lay off people. But I don't know if anybody from council would care to comment on anything that was brought up just now.
I'll comment just because I was spoken to directly. Regarding the legislation that Mr. Carr was referencing, I do plan on introducing that hopefully early next year, by March. I still have to look into more specifics regarding the legislation, but that is my personal deadline. He also talked about compromise a little bit, and I understand completely where Mr. Carr is coming from regarding the elderly on fixed incomes and also the middle class who have had difficulty just getting by week to week. I probably should have been a little bit more specific in my statement, but when I mentioned compromise, the only way that I would vote for any sort of a fee increase is if there were significant concessions from our unions. I know that Mayor Brown had mentioned that he doesn't have control over a wage freeze, and that's correct. He doesn't have direct control over that. And that's why I wish the union heads would at least call into our meeting so we could ask them some of these questions as to, why they don't want to approach their employees and their respective unions for a wage freeze. I've said it before, but my father was a union painter for years, and not even with the pandemic, there were numerous times where he had to take a pay freeze, and the union voted for that, and they did so overwhelmingly because they knew that it would save their jobs. So that's one thing that's concerning to me. I think it's greedy, to be very frank, that they don't want to take any concessions, not even a pay freeze, if it means saving their jobs and saving their coworkers' jobs. So long story short, that's what I mean by compromise. If there were significant concessions, then I would agree to a modest fee increase, nowhere near what's being proposed. And that's, again, if we exhausted every other single option that is available to us. I don't think that the taxpayers should be footing this burden by themselves. And I also think that if a fee increase were to be put into place, that there would need to be some financial help for people who can't afford it, specifically low and middle income people and those on a fixed income. So I hope that helped to address some of those concerns.
Anyone else? Okay, no calls? Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Thank you, sir. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.